Minnesota United take on Real Salt Lake July 17th at 9:30 p.m. in the MLS is Back tournament.
Big games, Steve Pickles!
Tonight's show is presented by Allianz, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota, and M Health Fairview. Hello there and welcome to a brand new match recap show brought to you by Minnesota United. Callum Williams here alongside Kyndra D. St. Aubin as always. And today we're joined by the supremely well-spoken Minnesota United midfielder Ethan Finlay. Ethan joining us from Orlando. How are you?
I'm good. I'm surviving. We've been here for over 2 weeks, so this is my humble abode, as you can see. I didn't make my bed. I had service this morning, so for anyone who was wondering, I haven't been making my bed every morning. It just looks that good today.
Well, Ethan, we appreciate you joining us. Your bed looks about as tidy as the football did for Minnesota United, particularly in the last 30 minutes of the game against Sporting Kansas City on Sunday. We'll get to that a little later on. Before we start to break down the victory against Sporting KC, what have you seen from the tournament so far? Have you been impressed with some of the football?
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of early season, preseason games right now. Guys are still really trying to get their legs under them. Even teams that have had the opportunity to get 90 minutes while they were down here in the week prior, it still takes time. And I think the soccer will continue to improve as the tournament goes on. We're starting to see, I think, a lot more goals. I think the strategy going into game 2 and 3 is going to be really interesting when it comes to starting lineups, to subs, teams even looking at what the standings look like. I was thinking about it, not trying to get too far ahead, but just thinking about what it would look like, our last game in our group. The teams play, 9 a.m. in the morning and we play 10:30 p.m. There's an opportunity that we could already be through in that situation going into that late game and still just really competing for seeding. So I think as we go on, I think we're going to see a little bit more strategy behind it. I think game 1, everyone's trying to get their feet wet. But I think we'll see some better soccer, and I think some interesting strategy going forward in game 2 and 3.
Well, we talked about specifically getting your feet wet for the tournament and heading into game 1. I mean, Cal and I talked quite a bit about what can you expect from Minnesota United, from Sporting Kansas City, and from any club in their first match for that matter. Is that how you expected, or what was your expectation going into minute 1 of when your game kicked off against Kansas City? Were you a little bit shocked at how you guys were on the back foot early?
Well, I didn't expect, and I think no one expected for us to lose Luis before the whistle blew, which I think can sometimes make its way through the group. Obviously, it was tough for him not being able to be a part of the lineup, but we have high expectations for him, and so then to lose such an influential player in the prior games he has been, and we expected him to be during this tournament. So to lose him before the game even started, I think, was a little bit of a downer for all of us. But it took us 45 minutes maybe, and maybe actually 60 to really respond to it. And that's what you need. We played against a really organized team, a very smart team. I mean, Kansas City has been a beast in the West for a good decade now, and they pride themselves on their organization. And it took us, honestly, a good half to figure out how we could press them, and we weathered that storm and only gave up 1 goal in the first half. And thankfully we were able to only give up just 1 goal and keep it close. And I think that's what allowed us to have such a nice comeback in the last 30 minutes.
So before we get to the highlights, Ethan, there were several new faces in the starting 11 from what people would expect. We knew Ike Opara was absent from the tournament. Ozzy Alonso, to our knowledge, failed a fitness test. That meant a Minnesota debut for Jose Aja. In came Hassani Dotson. And as you mentioned then, Luis Amarilla pulling out at the very last second, giving Mason Toy his first start of the season. With that in mind, let's take a look at the highlights and see how Minnesota United claimed their first victory of this MLS is Back tournament. Of course, the opponents were Sporting Kansas City. And Kyndra D. St. Aubin, there was an element of the unknown coming into this game, wasn't there?
Absolutely. I think we all kind of thought from the first kick, we weren't sure if it was going to be frenetic, if someone was going to sit back, if it was going to be the kind of situation where somebody was going to be on the front foot. And we see that one right there, Ethan. Jan Gregus stepping up on a ball that trickles out 25 yards out and has a really nice strike that has to be saved and tipped over the bar. Is that the kind of thing that you guys need to see from Jan Gregus to have that scoring threat from that position on the field to kind of help that attacking front four out?
Yeah, I think we knew coming into this game that this game was going to be kind of won or lost a bit in the midfield. The way the style that they played, kind of overloading the midfield. And like I said, it took us probably 45 minutes to really figure that out. It's a tough task to ask Asani to kind of come in a bit on short notice, Jan, and then just being able to work together. And I think it took us a little bit of time to get there.
Well, and then we look at Kansas City's goals, and they had a couple pieces there and moments in transition where Minnesota United is pushing up on the break. You get your numbers in the attacking half of the field, and then maybe one turnover, one pass backwards, and they made a meal of it a couple times going the other way with a couple passes out and that pace on the outside. Ian Fuller had told us last week you want to stay compact centrally and force them to the wings, but then they also have such threats on the wings with such pace. So in some of that transition and some of the goals that we saw from Kansas City, specifically the one goal, how did you see that playing out from the opposite side of the pitch?
Yeah, transition we knew was going to be key. We thought it was going to be a great asset for us. Unfortunately, most of our opportunities really came out of transition. Obviously, Shelton's goal in the first half. You saw Jerso's, break out in the second half, and he kind of made a mess of that one. I'm sure he wants that one back, but I think as the game went on, our transition game really took over. And you really just see it right here with Aaron. Great ball in by Romain, great touch, and that's the game-changing moment. Aaron really from the first moment he came onto the field gave us a little bit different of a dynamic. He felt fresher, I think, at the time. Mason was asked to kind of come in definitely on very, very short notice and had a really good run out for us. But I think Aaron being able to go up against some tired defenders here, really made a game-changing play, obviously, right here with the red card. And this is where the game really started to change. We didn't score right away off this, but for the next 15 minutes, we were really on the front foot.
Well, and even going into halftime, you mentioned it. I think, possession was 70-something to 30-something, but you're only down 1-0. And I think it was in the 60th minute when you guys got that corner kick, the set-piece opportunity that your goal was called back on. And we had just talked in the broadcast, look, it only takes one moment to change this thing, one spark, one situation, even though you guys had been relatively dominated by Kansas City. Do you think your goal that you scored but was called back was the start of a bit of momentum? It turned out to be a negative moment calling it back, but you guys knew that you had the ability to get in the box, to finish a chance, and then the wheels kind of started spinning and going. As you said, Schoenfeld was just fantastic and made some incredible runs for you guys to play off underneath.
It definitely created a sense of belief, I think, in the group, and I think on the night, the subs made the biggest difference. Obviously the guys that started the game and Romain with a great cross here, but Raheem there not to give up on that ball makes a game-winning moment, and he should get plenty of credit for it because it's very easy to not get in the box there when the ball's on the other side, and he's already done plenty of running during his short shift that he was out there. So those little moments in the game where I think we kept that belief that we could get this 3 points here was extremely important for us.
And going back to some of those runs that are in the box, because a lot of the chances that you guys did create were, play on the wings and then balls coming in. As you said, Raheem Edwards, another fantastic substitution and a spark, making that back post run, not giving up on it nearly on the end line and not, just letting it go out of bounds or hoping it goes for a corner kick or a goal kick there. And also some of the runs inside the box, getting in front of the keeper, making the run to the front post, making sure you get there first. How much was that a point of emphasis? And a credit to the guys, I believe you said this post game, you guys were exhausted. It's hot. It's your first 90 minutes. And that last 20 or 30 minutes was where you all seemed to kind of find that extra burst and making those extra runs. So how much was that just a credit to the guys in the grind?
A lot. I even think before the red card, we really started to take a hold of the game. And I think that was really from a physical standpoint. We were able to run a little bit harder than them. Cover a little bit more ground on both sides of the ball, and started to really create those opportunities and chances. And we started to press them a tad bit more. They had such great possession numbers in the first half and probably were able to relax on it a little bit. I think as we were able to press them in the second half and get tighter to players, we were able to make a little bit of a difference. Polito was, fantastic on the evening in and of it himself, but you saw, I think, as the second half went on, he was really sometimes alone up there. And he was able to beat one or two guys a couple of times, but I think some of our back pressing, some of those little moments to win the ball in our half, and then to break out with real numbers, that was something in the first half we weren't able to do. They did such a good job at repressing after they lost the ball, and they didn't quite have the legs to do that, I think, in the second half, and it allowed us to get out on the break and get numbers in the box.
The last one for me, specifically looking back at the Kansas City game and just telling people in general, put your analyst cap on. What do people need to know about Aaron Schoenfeld's game? You are very familiar with him and his abilities. What do people need to know about him and his game now that they've gotten to see a glimpse of him in this match against Kansas City?
Well, he can do it in many different ways. I thought when we brought Aaron on this team, he has the opportunity to start games and be your all-out striker. He has the opportunity to come and play with another striker and have two guys up top. A lot of times we play with the 10 more and have just a lone striker up there. So I think he was going to be able to give us that type of element. So it was going to be whether it was starting or off the bench, he was going to be a great asset for us. He's a guy who could be a dynamic player with slashing runs in behind defenses, which a lot of big guys aren't great at that. He's a guy who, for being as big as he is, likes to get to the near post. He doesn't drift as much to the back post as a lot of strikers do with his kind of size. And then he can compete in the air, an element that, I think we've been a little bit missing. When I say that, I think, you can have good hold-up play, but I think really being able to win headers and flick-ons was something that this group really hasn't had, at least from the front position. We've got some tremendous players in the air, in our back line, but to give us that real dynamic with a guy who can win balls in the air and flick balls on and really cause defenders, not just one center back, but both center backs trouble, I think was going to allow us a lot more space for our number 10s and for our wingers.
Ethan, a slew of positives to take from the first victory in this MLS back tournament for Minnesota United, but let's get the negative out of the way first, shall we? Tyler Miller and the goal that was for Sporting Kansas City, not the goalkeeper's finest moment, I think even he will admit that. How is he doing from a psychological point of view?
Yeah, I think he's good. Tyler talked. It's always better when you make a play like that and then you still get the victory, right? The one thing I'll say from a mistake purposes, when it comes from a goalkeeper, it's always usually the worst case scenario by giving up a goal. For us attackers, we can miss wide open goals and PKs, and sometimes it's easier forgotten because we're going to have more opportunities. And so I think mentally Tyler's fine. I think he knows it. He made maybe the wrong judgment call there, but I don't mind it from a guy who is in a way always trying to improve. And he thought it was a moment where he could kind of, in a way, guess in that situation. I think he looks back at it, he says, maybe that's not the right time and the right angle that I should do that. And, kudos to him to kind of stay in it and to not, get psyched out by it too much. He's so good on crosses that I think he in those situations, he just needs to have confidence that he can cover his near post, and he can probably most likely still cut that out if that ball gets slipped. So a little lapse in judgment there from him, but we have full faith in him.
What about the goal that never was? You were the individual that put the ball in the back of the net. Eventually, there was a flurry of bodies inside the 6-yard box. To our knowledge, it was disallowed because Kevin Molino was half an inch offside. What did you make of that decision?
Yeah, so I haven't gotten a clear answer on it, and it's one of the issues I have a little bit from a communication standpoint. Not only just with the system here at the MLS Backers tournament, but just in general. My understanding, there wasn't a clear call on the field, so we thought it was called a goal, and I think the referee's interpretation of it was he called nothing, and I heard the sideline guy saying, I think it's offside. So. And my problem with this, just like they talk about in football, there needs to be what clearly happened here. Let's have a call on the field. And then is that going to stand? Is it going to be confirmed, or is it going to be overturned? Right. That's how it is clearly in another sport. And again, it's not clear in football. Don't get me wrong. But I never got a clear answer on, okay, what was the call on the field? So are we overturning something or are we confirming something? And that's my issue with VAR. That's my issue with, really our setup here. We put all this money and infrastructure into this tournament. There's been at least a handful already in 5 days of very close offsides calls, that have resulted in goals that are going to make a huge difference. I referenced one a couple of nights ago in the Columbus game where maybe Zardes is a step off, but they never got a really good angle on it. And so, for me, that game was maybe out of hand even already at that point. But every goal is going to matter in this tournament when it comes to goals for. And, frankly, we're down here to compete, and we want to be as fair as possible. So I really wish they had more technology here. It's a great moment for us to be trying some of the new technology, I would think, because you don't have to deal with, stadiums and infrastructure. You should be able to bring all that stuff in this situation. Maybe I'm way off on that. But that was what's disappointing for me is I think, my play is maybe going to be a microcosm for what we could see going down the road with some of these very close calls and not having a great angle that can decisively say if this is onside or offsides.
Well, eventually Minnesota United were rewarded with the equalising goal, courtesy of an own goal from Kyrie Shelton. The head coach of Sporting KC, Ethan Peter Vermees, had said during the week that he was very concerned about Minnesota United from a set-piece point of view. Why is there so much emphasis on that worry from an opposing point of view now, as opposed to previous years?
Well, I think service won. I think Jan's service has been really, really good. It continues to get better. He can pick a pass. He hits it with pace. The goal that we had last night, 2 nights ago, the own goal was a situation where he's just putting it in the right spot. And that makes it difficult on defensive players to make a play. It makes it difficult on the goalie to make a play and come out for those balls and be commanding. So service. And then, we've got some great guys aerial. We talked a little bit about, Schoenfeld. Michael Boxall has been on plenty of set pieces. We're missing probably the best guy in set pieces in the league, and Ike Opara. But Jose Aja, I think, has probably gotten on his head on more balls offensively and defensively over the last 2 weeks than a player out here. So I just think we've got great height. We've got guys who are good at timing. Luis, I think when he gets on the field, is one of these guys who is, only 5'10", 5'11", but he's got great leaping ability. And when he gets his head on it, it's not going to be a soft touch header. He can really snap it. So we've just got some guys who have a little bit of a knack for it. And, that's a great thing to have, especially in a tournament like this where things are going to come down to these hot moments where it's late in games and set pieces can be all the difference.
It certainly came down to a hot moment and one individual hot boy as well. It's safe to say it's a happy hunting ground, this stadium for Kevin Molino. Let's not forget in 2014, the USL iteration of Orlando City. This stadium was where they played before they moved into Major League Soccer. It's also the year where Kevin Molino broke the USL goal-scoring record. He scored plenty of goals in this stadium before. He did so on Sunday evening to give Minnesota the victory with essentially the last kick of the game. Talk us through that moment when you saw Raheem Edwards play the ball back in towards Molino.
Yeah, so the one guy, of course, that was the fittest on the field was still running at a high pace, and that was Romain Metrin. That was just, him taking that heavy touch and probably giving his last burst that he had on the night was a game-changing moment in and of itself. So, that cross, and like I said, Raheem to have the presence of mind to not try to smash it across, but to lay it back to Kevin, and Kevin to just coolly put it away, right? He's got a rushing defender on him. He's got a small little space there at the near post, and to just calm and coolly to put it through, the defender's legs there and into the near post was it was a great moment, I know, for him, and I think it was a great moment for our group. I think if you go back and look at everyone's reaction, it's pure joy, and I think a lot of that is just relief from obviously finishing our first 90 minutes, but to get a victory. We had such a great start to this season that we take a lot of pride in keeping that going, and this counts for the regular season, and that is something that our group is very focused on. Not that we're not focused on the tournament beyond, but these 3 games are very, very important to us. Probably just as important as this tournament and how far we go. But first and foremost, we really want to get results in these first 3 games, and we were able to do that with 3 points the other night.
Ethan, you mentioned there's been so much uncertainty over the course of the last few months, not only with Major League Soccer, but the entirety of the world. When Molino hit the back of the net and when the final whistle eventually went, what was the feeling like in the locker room?
It was excitement. Guys were absolutely pumped up, and it had been a long time coming for us. We've been playing against each other for the most part. We got to play that 45-minute scrimmage against Chicago, but you really, at some point, you just want to kick somebody else. And we were able to do that. And, we played a great opponent, a great team for us to play against, a team that we have a lot of history with in our short time already in the MLS. So I think that kind of helped easily, get the juices up for everybody. And, anytime you're able to take out a team that, I'm not going to necessarily call them a rival, but that you're very familiar with, that you've had plenty of games and competition against, you sometimes you take satisfaction in that, and continuing to hopefully have the best of them. So it was great. It was it's a very good team that we played against. They were obviously top of the West at the time, and so we had our sights on them for at least 4 months now. And so this group's really excited, but we know that we have a big one coming up, against Salt Lake coming up Friday night, and a team that has had a lot of changes, some new familiar faces that we'll have to get used to, and also a late game. That's something I'll tell you. 10:30 kickoff it's a different beast, and I say I would probably like an early kickoff, but I also felt the heat today in that early kickoff. So it'll be really interesting. A lot of adversity that we have to face here, but I think the other night we faced it head on and came out on the other side.
Last one from me, Ethan, is just speaking of the adversity, the grind. I mean, and maybe the excitement heading into that first game, knowing you're finally going to get to kick somebody else and play against somebody else. But as these weeks kind of wear on, how are you guys going to sort of stay mentally focused, mentally sharp? I mean, it's emotionally, mentally draining. You have families back at home. I mean, how are you guys going to stay with that kind of positive attitude?
Yeah, I'll say this: wins cure a lot of things. Even having the mental wear and tear of not being able to be and see your family. There's something about a victory that you can have with your teammates that can cure a lot and make a lot feel a lot less worse than it is. So I think the more success that we have here, I know we're going to have to obviously be here longer, but I think that that will drive us and hopefully help us going forward. And, saying that, we understand the sacrifices that we're making, and I'm just really proud of my guys. This hasn't been an easy 3-4 months on anybody in the world. And I've been directly impacted, and I know that my teammates have been directly impacted by it. And so, when you see excitement and the big smiles that guys are having, and the sense of normalcy that we had in that locker room after that win, where, we got our music on and we're just, in that moment, it felt like we were back to where we were 4 months ago in the locker room in San Jose. That was really happy for me.
Well, Ethan Finlay, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We really, really appreciate your time. My thanks, as always, to Kyndra and Aubin, and of course to you at home for joining us as well. Minnesota United, of course, back underway Friday evening, 9:30 p.m. Central. You can watch the game on ESPN or join us on the radio on Score North. Keep your eyes peeled to the MNUFC social channels for more broadcast information as the week goes on. And as always, for all the latest on Minnesota United, keep it right here on MNUFC.com.
Tonight's show is presented by Allianz, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota, and M Health Fairview.
Minnesota United take on Real Salt Lake July 17th at 9:30 p.m.
in the MLS is back.